Why does our food safety policy have to be driven by importing countries and their consumers? We are also consumers of food and our health matters. Then why the lack of action by our food safety authorities to protect us, Indian consumers? Then importing countries buying food items from us have set up tough enforcement systems so that they check consignments and ban what they find is not safe or not meeting standards. What about the food we eat? And finally, what do farmers do when governments set standards for food safety? It tells them to limit the use of pesticide or antibiotics. What is their way ahead? I am Sunita Narain. This is my show. And in this episode, I will be discussing these questions about food safety. Please do watch. Please do subscribe to our channel. Click the like button. All this keeps us doing this show. Keeps me from knowing that you are watching and keeps us from doing what we do. Explain developments, all to prod change. So what is the issue on hand? A few years ago, the European Union, EU, issued directives on antibiotics used in the food it imports. This meant that any animal product, including fish, dairy, and honey, that was manufactured using antibiotics as growth promoters or to increase yield would not be allowed into Europe. It also put out a list of antibiotics which are critical for humans, which would then be banned for veterinary use. When this directive was released in 2023, India was omitted from the list of countries allowed to export aquaculture and poultry products. That is as of September 2026, when the directive would come into force. This was done, according to the EU, because of lack of information and regulation on the use of antibiotics in India's food producing sector. Then the Indian government stepped in. In October 2024, the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, also known as FSSAI, issued a list of antibiotics which would be banned for use in any stage of production of meat, milk, poultry, eggs, and aquaculture. Any stage of production. It also set tolerance limit, also called maximum residue limit, MRL, for antibiotics that would be allowed. In other words, these antibiotics could be used but would need to be carefully monitored so that food would not contain higher levels than what was stipulated. In addition, in May 2025, the Union Ministry of Health issued a draft notification banning the veterinary use of 34 out of the 37 antibiotics in the EU list of critical for human antibiotics. Let me take a second to explain this. So we know that there is a list of antibiotics that humans use and are critical for us. The question has always been, can this not be used for veterinary purposes so that overuse is stopped? So in this case, the Indian government issued a draft to say that 34 of the 37 antibiotics would not be used. This draft was finalized and notified as of September 2025, saying that the government was satisfied that antibiotics in the banned list, if used on animals, would risk human health. It also said that safer alternatives of these drugs were available. which could then be used for treatment of diseases in animals. All this done in May 2026, EU revised its earlier exclusion list and put India back on the list of countries permitted to export animal products post September 2026. This is good, what has happened. But the questions that I would like to discuss with you are as follows. One, while it is clear that these government policies are critical for safeguarding our health, the question I have is, why does it have to be driven by external consumer pressures? We know antibiotic resistance is a silent pandemic, as overuse of these critical medicines means that the bugs that they are used against are becoming resistant. And this means that the medicine will not work. It is literally a matter of life and death. We also know that the Indian government is committed to fighting the issue of antibiotic resistance. We as a country cannot afford the health burden of life-saving medicines becoming ineffective. The government has also been taking steps to contain the use of antibiotics in food-producing animals. In 2010, based on the analytical study released by the Center for Science and Environment, CSE, government had issued an advisory prohibiting the use of antibiotics in honey, which was then followed up with a ban. In 2019, the Government of India banned the use of colistin in food-producing animals and in agriculture. Now, colistin is one of the top reserved antibiotics for humans and needs full protection over overuse. The government was also contemplating bans on antibiotics in animal feed and many other steps. But even after countless committees and meetings and recommendations, it had not agreed on the comprehensive measures needed to prevent antibiotic use in livestock or aquaculture. This was finally done, prodded by the need to protect our export markets. What is good is that these regulations are now not just for the food that is sold to EU, but will also apply to the meat, the milk, the eggs, the honey, the fish that we eat. It will protect our health. And this should take us to the question that it's not just about antibiotic, but also about the safety in the food we consume. We need standards for pesticides, for additives, and for other toxins that will protect our health. It should be incidental that these food safety standards would also ensure that India's food is good for export. It should not be the reason for doing so. The reason has to be the protection of our health. We know this is not happening as yet. A quick dive into the US Food and Drug Administration's database, which they track on the refusal to import food, showed that some 2,700 Indian food imports were rejected in about a year, 2024 to 2025. This included spices, rice, pulses, lentils. And this was done because the US government said that these foods had excessive or unapproved pesticide residue. This then takes me to the next question on how will these standards be enforced. The importing countries have developed very rigorous systems for monitoring the food that they import. This is based on quality and residue checks in authorized laboratories and even at their borders. For instance, the EU plans to ensure compliance with its directive on no antibiotic use in animals by asking every single shipment to have a health certificate. But importantly, this health certificate will be signed not by the private party which is selling or exporting the food, but by the government agency. So the government is required to take responsibility. It will then do in-country audits and spot checks at the border. According to its directive, if one of the shipments fails the analytical checks, it then pushes the red button and increases the number of physical checks for food imports from that country, and multiple such failures could lead to serious consequences. But what about the food that is not exported? What can and must be done to improve the compliance so that we as consumers also are assured that the food we eat is safe and within standards? The third question I have for you is, what will farmers do so that they can still be productive without the use of antibiotics? This question really changes the way our food is grown. So, for instance, if you take antibiotics, farmers use this medicine for three separate purposes. To promote growth in animals, literally they give antibiotics to animals so that they can become fatter and can grow faster. They also give antibiotics to prevent diseases, and this is done because of lack of hygiene or because of high density of animals. And this then is really a preventive tools for farmers. And of course, the third purpose is that they give it when the animal is sick, is diseased, as antibiotics are meant to be given. So now, what is allowed is that farmers can still give those antibiotics which are not in the banned list to animals, but only for treatment of disease. And this means that farmers will then need other steps to prevent diseases, not by using antibiotics, but by improving conditions in which animals are bred and food is manufactured. The most promising example we have is the way the National Dairy Development Board, NDDB, has worked with its farmers to promote the use of ethnomedicine, traditional practices for treatment of animal diseases, and has worked with farmers to show them how this could reduce the use of antibiotics. And this has reduced the use of antibiotics. This is the win-win we need. Measures to reduce the cost for farmers and also to produce safe food for us. It is about the food we eat. Food safety is about our health.